welcome everyone. Today we'll have speaking Alberto Gomez, who's the Director of Product Management, and Clay Smith, who's a Developer Advocate here at New Relic. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Alberto, excuse me, and he'll have us get started. But first, I want to go over a few housekeeping notes. First, today's webinar will be recorded, and a link will be available to you tomorrow in your inbox. We also have a live Q&A session after the fact, so please feel free to ask any questions during or after the presentation, and we'll be sure to get to them. If we don't have time to get to them all today, we will send you a follow-up via email. And of course, if you have any feedback for us, we have a brief survey at the end, and we'd love to hear how we can improve or any other notes that you'd like to share with us. With that, I'll hand it over to Alberto.
All right, so thanks, Jackson. So here's a brief agenda about what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to touch into 6 points here. We're going to start looking into how we're monitoring the changes in the cloud. Then we're going to move into understanding the cloud applications architecture, and then getting a little bit of visibility into how's it managed into the managed cloud services and the native integrations into those services, and then looking into the cloud monitoring explained by data type, and we'll end with the platform requirements for cloud monitoring. And after that, we're going to move into a Q&A. So we're going to start getting your questions. So feel free to post your questions anytime, and we'll address those or the ones that we can address in the end of the presentation. So with that, let me just move into the first slide. We're just really talking about the evolution that we've been, that the whole industry has been experiencing over a period of the last 6 to 7 years. So we're coming from a world where there was one deployment every quarter, or even every semester, or we were stamping floppies, or we were stamping CDs or DVDs to ship our software, into a world that's changing and it's evolving into doing 2 deployments a week, 3 or 4 years ago, and into nowadays where we have many frameworks, we have different cloud providers, different cloud vendors. We're using infrastructure as a service, we're using software as a service, we're using platforms as a service, we're using a myriad of tools to instrument our containers, to instrument our day-to-day operations, and that resulting into just doing many deploys into production every day. So that of course is a transition that the whole industry is suffering. There's different levels of maturity into that transition, but that of course requires the right tools in place to monitor the whole piece, the entire chain. And if we're looking into the application, into the infrastructure itself, the underlying infrastructure that supports your applications are coming from these 3 large servers that you had in your data center, that big database that if it was falling down, everything was screwed. And that was the old clunky infrastructure that was supporting these quarterly launches. Whereas today, instead, we are living in a world where there's and again, there's different levels of maturity, but the early adopters are living in a world where everything lives in microservices that are running in containers, which are orchestrated either through Mesos, Kubernetes. Everything is operating multiple applications into small instances, which are distributed in different regions, with distributed databases as well that you might use as a service, and that are supporting and are helping you gaining this agility to develop and to deploy many times a day, and just get the features ready and shipped in a matter of days and sometimes hours even. All right. So what are the must-haves in order to run in the forefront of technology today? So I think number one, and that's the key piece, is understanding your architecture and understanding how your applications are running in the underlying infrastructure that are supporting them. I think gaining those visibility and viewability metrics that really help you see where this world is going. Sorry. All right. Apologies. Here we go. I don't know why this picture isn't showing, but anyway, we had a picture here from Service Maps. Service Maps really is a tool that we've developed and we launched last year that's really helping you to understand how the different pieces of your software are performing, and really it's mapping automatically how the applications connect between the different pieces and shows the dependencies of your applications, including like databases or external services that your application might have touch points with. And it's really showcasing how the applications are talking to each other and how applications are interacting. At the same time, showing up, what are the KPIs for those touch points, and if there's any trouble, of course, it will pop up and just show you that. Yeah. So that was from the application perspective. Service maps help you just understand how your application touch points are performing, and if there's any bottleneck, it just can help you get into the solution of that bottleneck. Then earlier this year, we just launched Health Maps, which Health Maps is really the combination of how the applications are performing, as well as how the underlying infrastructure is performing, and it's bringing both worlds together into a single view. So you can both look at with the lens of application or with the lens of the infrastructure. And again, Health Map is providing you both with the KPI that you need and with traffic lights that help you quickly identify where the issues and where the bottlenecks, so you can really make an immediate action into those either applications or services. All right. Moving forward, of course, one of the key pieces is understanding that both Service Maps and Health Maps show the cloud touch points. So it's really important in nowadays, gaining visibility on how the cloud is performing, because it's a key piece of your overall infrastructure and application itself. So both Service Maps and Health Maps, and especially in Health Maps, where you can create custom filter sets, you get all the metadata that you have in your cloud ingested into New Relic, so you can create those filter sets for the applications which are running in the cloud or are running in hybrid environment, so they can show you, and Health Maps can show you where things are going south. All right, and with that, a key point, as we were mentioning, is to gaining monitoring capabilities on cloud integrations, and especially when moving from an on-prem to a cloud, or when migrating from a cloud to another cloud, it's fundamental that you have the right visibility tools in place. And that front, in New Relic, we're investing a lot of resources on getting monitoring tools across the entire stack. So from mobile to browser, and then through the underlying applications running, call it the backend systems, the APIs, to the underlying infrastructure, as well as the cloud services that you might be using. And of course, for the cloud services that you might be using, for those we require specific cloud-to-cloud integrations with the cloud vendors. So here's where we really have or have been investing a lot of resources on building over, well, more AWS service integrations today, past service integrations, that together with the information that we get from the different agents in New Relic infrastructure, from the different agents in APM, and from the mobiles and the browsers in your UX, we can get the entire value chain of your applications and of your business monitored with New Relic. So moving forward into the cloud itself, of course, one of the things that we've been investing a lot of time has been on developing integrations which are fundamentally, which are adding fundamental value. And in those, we've seen a lot of workflows using Elasticsearch, Kinesis Firehose, and of course Route 53. But spatially, we're just providing our customers with the capability to monitor how their billing systems are working, so how much money they're spending into AWS, as well as being able to set up budgets to control, how a specific region is doing in terms of spender, or how a specific service is doing in terms of spend. That together with the ECS and ECR service, which is the container service and the container registry from AWS. That's just to say that we are, of course, providing a lot of support with AWS today, and it's a fundamental area of investment for us. So as I was saying, right now with New Relic, you can gain insights into browsers, into mobile, into the applications themselves, instrumenting your software, and then you can get into gain visibility into the underlying infrastructure piece, and all that data that flows into New Relic can be visualized and can be consumed and studied and analyzed into New Relic Insights, which is our dashboarding tool, fully customizable dashboarding tool that with an easy to use SQL-like language that we call NearQL or New Relic QL, allows you to get all that data and really be able to see from the transactions that happen in the UX till the transactions that happen in the application itself and the underlying infrastructure, how everything's performing and how things are going into your digital business. Of course, one of the things that we have in the infrastructure product is the capability to monitor the events that are happening into your cloud environment as well. So if you have an instance going out of a research group, or if you got an instance going out of a security group, or if you have an RDS managed database instance that's changing configuration, we get all that feed of events, of operational events that help you correlate, when things are starting to work better or when things are working worse, which is fundamental when you're making many deploys a day, right? So monitoring is key, especially in the cloud. And of course, one of the fundamental differences that we have in the infrastructure product and at New Relic in general is that our alerting system allows to create alerts based on the dynamic infrastructure that you're managing. So all your infrastructure today is dynamic. You cannot place alerts based on host name, because that host name can go down anytime, can be auto scale, can be a myriad of things can happen to that host name. And instead, in New Relic infrastructure today, you can alert based on the different AWS stacks that you have, based on security groups, and based on different on the process itself that you're running, on the application that you're running, and so on and so forth. So we're not looking into individual instances. We're just looking into the performance of the applications managed with tags or with any other grouping mechanisms that are used into the dynamic infrastructure environment. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Clay, so he tells you a little bit more about metrics, traces, and events.
Great, thanks, Alberto. Yeah, for this part of the webinar, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into the different types and sources of monitoring data itself. Alberto just did a great demonstration of some of our native cloud integrations, Service Map and Health Map. And I think especially now if you're moving to the cloud or if you're operating cloud native infrastructure, it's sometimes hard to assess kind of where you are with your monitoring capabilities and where gaps might be. And so briefly, before we just go a little bit deeper into the New Relic product itself, wanted to just quickly poll the audience. GoToWebinar has an interesting poll feature. You don't have to use it, but it would be interesting just to see where everyone is. So if you expand the poll right there, you can go ahead and vote on this. It's what are your sources of metrics? Basically of the places that you're collecting data from, where do you currently have operational visibility? Is it the server virtual hardware, the operating system, the application, the mobile, or browser? So if you go ahead and select the places where you're currently gathering metrics, it's anonymous. We'll just see kind of where people have a visibility. Just I'll give you a couple seconds to select one or more options, just to get an idea of kind of where people are collecting operational metrics. Let's see, it looks like we've got around 60, 64%. This is actually kind of fun to watch. I don't know if you can see the poll completed, but it looks like I'll give you 5 or 6 more seconds. Great, let's go ahead and call it 70% voted, not bad. So if we go ahead and look at the results there, it's actually pretty interesting and not all that surprising. So this more or less pretty closely matches what we hear from a lot of our customers, that people have some capabilities to gather application metrics. That makes sense given New Relic APM. People are collecting server metrics from the operating system, and also either the virtual or physical hardware as well. As you get closer to the customer, it seems like that number goes down a little. But great coverage so far. And from there, we're going to go back to the presentation and kind of talk about some of those sources and metrics. All right, let me go back here. Great. So thanks for participating in the poll. That's pretty interesting. And for the rest of the webinar, actually, we're going to be getting deeper into those areas where a lot of people have demonstrated that they have sources for metrics. So just very, very broadly, one way we think about the types of data you collect from the application, the server hardware, for mobile, for browser, that they can be very broadly categorized into 3 different types of events. And the reason we introduce this framework, or the reason we talk about it this way, is these different sorts of data types have pretty different use cases and different uses to actually help you either understand what's going on or potentially troubleshoot. So most people are familiar with logs, human readable events, something like the system startup output, process output, and we, using some different partner integrations with Splunk and Sumo Logic, allow you to view log data. Metrics are also pretty familiar to most people. Spark lines, they're measurements of different events or events with a number attached. There you get the classic things like throughput, error rate, request rates, duration. We are obviously collecting metrics from all of the sources in that poll. But one I also wanted to highlight, and I think this is the third one that gets maybe a little bit less attention, is this idea of a trace. So by a trace, and we'll be exploring this a little bit more, I'm really referring to the idea of relationship, a relationship between different events. So if there was an error, you had a 500 requests in the application, what were the different components involved and where was time being spent? And we also collect trace data from a mobile browser and the application itself. So I just introduced that to explain the different sorts of data that's being collected, and also just to highlight that it's really all three that can be really useful for operating in cloud environments. From there, let's just jump into the area where most people said they have, or a large majority of people said they are collecting metrics. So this was the around 70% of people that replied to the poll says that, yeah, you know, they have some data coming from something like an application host, so the server that the application is running on. And you see different categories of metrics. These are kind of the traditional set of metrics, the things that a lot of people have or collecting. And this is really useful just to understand trends and system performance and overall health. Of course, a really common one is just CPU utilization, disk space possibly, or large jumps in network traffic. If those metrics, if those trends you know, get to a high enough number, it typically indicates a problem or something people want to know about that are operating those systems. So that's kind of like the very baseline for understanding what's going on the host or operating system level. From there, though, we can actually get a little bit higher level into the application itself. This was an area where 90% of people who replied to the poll said they have some coverage. Given that over 90% of people said they have coverage in this area, I'm not going to spend especially long on it. This is a screenshot from New Relic APM. This is the overview page this is a Node.js application. It's one of 6 different languages we support for APM, but it becomes really easy from this data just to understand things like response time, error rate, throughput, and the AppDex score, which is an industry standard that's a ratio of satisfied users that are actually interacting with that application. But all of those metrics at a very high level go a little bit deeper than things like CPU utilization, memory usage, or disk space, and actually get to the idea of, well, how is that application running on that operating system actually performing in the first place? But we find that a lot of people, you know, these are very good metrics to follow for just getting that level of visibility a little bit deeper than the server level itself. So moving on from metrics into this idea of transactions, and I apologize, it looks like our slide software has had some issues loading some of the embedded images today. But fortunately for this slide, it just is a definition. A transaction in the New Relic terminology is just a particular path through your code. And one thing that you could see if this image was loading, and we'll share the deck after, which will allow you to actually see the fully loaded images here. But one of the ideas here, and I think one really important thing to call out, is if you know a bunch of particular paths that the different requests took through your code, when you group all those things together, it's extremely useful to help your technical teams know where to focus effort. So there was an error. How often does that error take place? What percentage of overall user requests are affected by that error? It's just making that jump from knowing the path through the code to actually knowing where to focus effort. So these transactions in aggregate. To go a little bit deeper into traces, and again, apologies for the technical difficulties here. We'll share the deck afterwards to make sure that people can actually see the images. But the idea here is really just knowing that sequence of events that took place in a transaction. If this is kind of like the Pictionary version here, but imagine this screenshot was actually showing you a stack trace, and then showing you in that stack trace where the breakdown in code was. So the idea here is that for any particular path that was taken through their code, we're actually able to determine where time was being spent. So the main use case here is, let's say an application transaction was slow. We wanted to understand, well, why was that particular transaction slow? And in this case, the screenshot actually shows us that a lot of that time is spent in an external database call. So the ability to kind of jump from a very or lower system level metric, like, well, CPU utilization spiked. Well, we know at the same time that when CPU utilization spiked, it was a particular application transaction. And in that specific transaction, we know that that transaction was slow because of an external call to the database. So gradually going deeper and deeper into the application layer, going from some high-level system metrics into the actual line of code that seems to be causing the problem. I think I want to kind of switch gears a little bit to just talk about, how do we do this? How do we get application metrics, and how does that apply to cloud monitoring, or why is it important for cloud monitoring? I think we showed earlier through Alberto's discussion of different cloud integrations, like with EC2 or RDS, that we're pulling different data from different cloud vendors that allow you to kind of ask questions like, well, is my CPU utilization stable for an EC2 instance? Or for RDS, looking at different database performance questions. And those, because they come directly from the cloud provider or cloud vendor, help us get visibility into kind of the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure that powers the application. But because with New Relic APM, we're actually instrumenting the application code, we're actually, and it depends on the language, but for Java, for example, we're actually annotating the actual bytecode to get deep into the application and seeing the different metrics and different breakdowns in a transaction of where time is being spent. We can get even deeper and saying, well, for a particular endpoint or an application transaction, we know it's 3 seconds slower after a particular deploy. And then eventually bubbling that all the way up to the browser, to kind of the end user monitoring story with mobile as well. That we know that, from a customer's perspective, that load time increased, for example. So it's really the combination of all of those different data types from all the data sources, from these managed cloud services through our native integrations to the actual operating system itself, whether it's virtualized or not, regardless of the instance type or region that it's running on, and into the application. So it's kind of from all those things and using that code instrumentation to get that level of detail and ultimately creating those rich metrics and traces. From there, I kind of wanted to close on the instrumentation point to just say that one of the things we know and one of the things we've been working on the application side with APM, but also with infrastructure using our new integrations SDK, is that for all this instrumentation that's automatic, we like to think that if you're installing infrastructure or if you're installing APM on one of our 7 languages, that you get a lot of value out of the box. You get metrics and traces more or less automatically that understand the frameworks that are running inside those applications. But we also know that there's a lot of value if you want to extend some of that with metadata or different details that are important to your specific application or business. A classic example would be for an application transaction it's very important. It's a key transaction. You could attach something like the account ID or the user ID to it. So, if something failed or if a lot of requests that were really important failed, you can then correlate that with, what was the user impact, or even specifically what users were impacted. And ultimately, through those custom attributes that you can attach to the applications or servers or browser and mobile applications, you ultimately get that operational data, whether they're metrics or traces or events, with that additional context. So the kind of next step would be after you kind of have that base level of instrumentation and visibility into all of these different pieces, to start bringing in some business specific metadata to make that even more useful and interesting. And that's something we work with a lot of customers on, and we think people are excited about it and get a lot of value from it. So just wanted to specifically call out the ability for all of this instrumentation and all these different layers to be extended with things that you might think are important that don't come out of the box in the product. And so we've covered a lot of the entire platform at this point, from the cloud integrations to looking at application health, to understanding the architecture of different services, how they fit together, We've even gone deep into code instrumentation in APM, looking at infrastructure SDKs. We've covered a lot. I want to end the webinar before we open up to questions, specifically on any of the products you saw that you want to ask more about or learn more about. We're happy to get into that in more detail. But just to kind of end with some platform requirements, in order to use all of that data effectively, in order to create the alerts to really effectively operate software, what are just basic platform requirements to make all that actually possible and useful? And I think we can break it down into a couple different ways. The three ones we like to talk to customers about are that, of course, the pricing of this model, especially as more people move to dynamic or ephemeral infrastructure, whether that's container-based or serverless, where you're really not running software on a host for years. Hosts come up and down. The ability to have a pricing model that maps the reality of that environment. We have a program specifically for those environments called Cloud-Friendly Pricing, and we're happy to send you more information about that. But also, in kind of related to that flexibility, especially with dynamic environments, is people build things that can kind of dynamically scale and react to really large demands. So a classic e-commerce use case would be a major shopping holiday like Black Friday. The number of hosts triples or quadruples, and the infrastructure gets significantly larger. Well, we know when that happens that the amount of monitoring data also scales enormously. So one of the things that we've designed the New Relic platform for is the ability to scale to extremely large spikes in customer traffic. So during your biggest day, or during a tweet or something that goes viral that causes traffic to just exponentially increase, that the monitoring systems scale with that and continue to be reliable. And I think related to the ability to scale is just kind of the forward-looking nature of it as well. That because this is a platform we've built specifically for the cloud, and I know Alberto and a lot of our engineering team are working on bringing even more integrations into the platform. But it's forward-looking in the sense that we're constantly updating it for new managed services, and ultimately, growing with our customers as people go down this path of more microservices, more managed cloud services, and as the direction of the entire industry goes that direction, to have the ability to get visibility into those new components automatically. And so that's one thing we're excited about, and especially as more of our customers go down that path, we're excited to see what they build and how we can work with them on that. Just to kind of end up with a quick link, if you're interested in more in cloud monitoring, some white papers and some resources, we have a new solution page up. This will be sent out with the webinar at the end of the recording, but we invite you to go there to learn more or to ask more questions. And at that point, I'm going to just wrap up that we think people can get a lot of value out of monitoring, particularly end-to-end from these managed integrations all the way up to mobile and browser. And with that, I'm going to jump over to Q&A, and Alberto and I are happy to answer any questions. Again, you can use the questions panel there and go to webinar, and we'll get to that. Thanks very much.
Clay, thank you for the great presentation. Yeah, we just had a few questions come in, and please, if you have any more, please feel free to submit them. First off, maybe this is a question for Alberto. Do we support AWS Lambda? Oh,
yeah, sure, absolutely. So yeah, we are in this big wave of serverless right now. So we are supporting AWS Lambda, we are supporting AWS Redshift, and within the AWS we'll support DynamoDB, and yeah, absolutely. This is I think it's the fundamental pieces for a serverless architecture we do support. Yes.
Great, thank you. And with infrastructure, is there a trial?
Oh yes, there is. There's a 30-day trial in infrastructure. You can just sign up on the New Relic webpage. So yeah, it's a 30-day trial. You get the full product for 30 days, which includes all the cloud integrations and host integrations as well. And yeah, you can play around with it for 30 days and then yeah, sign up for the product if you like it.
Great, thank you. So just a quick question about the cloud platform supported. You mentioned AWS. Is there support for Azure, and to what level? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we're working on more than one cloud at the moment. Right now, we are releasing support of Azure in the coming weeks. So yeah, we're working on the main clouds right now to provide support on them.
And that's including Google Cloud as well?
Yeah, that's including AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. That's right. Yeah.
Great.
And actually, I see a related platform question. Someone's asking whether we integrate with VMware virtualization itself. That's something we do through a plugin. It's called the Blue Medora plugin. We're happy to send some information to that. But you know, APM doesn't directly monitor, say, the VMware virtualization layer, but we do have some plugins and partnerships that would allow you to see that data alongside your application data. And we'll send you a link on that plugin to learn more.
So we have another question here. Matt asks, I've used New Relic APM for web applications and seen useful metrics and insights related to end user browser sessions. How does that relate to New Relic for native mobile apps?
Yeah, I'll take that one. Matt, that's a great question. New Relic Mobile for native apps works in a very similar way to New Relic Browser. So it's instrumentation of the native mobile app, whether it's iOS or Android. And from there, you actually get something similar to a session trace. It's called an interaction trace. And that's the kind of the path a user took through different screens in a mobile app. It varies depending on whether it's iOS or Android. But in terms, that's kind of the trace story for metrics. We're also doing things like, how long did the application take to load for different screens, and also external network requests as well. And obviously, part of New Relic Mobile monitoring is crash reporting as well. So if the application crashes, we're collecting those as well. So it's similar to browser with some mobile-specific features, specifically around network requests and also crash monitoring as well.
Great. And another question here, just regarding that Scott asks regarding APM. Does APM have the ability to perform logins to, say, secure systems to check performance?
Yes, Scott, we do. That was not covered in this webinar. It's through a product called New Relic Synthetics. New Relic Synthetics is essentially an automated, we call them minions, but it's essentially a scripted Chrome browser using a Selenium-like scripting language that would allow you to kind of perform a login, and as it goes and interacts through that page, to check things like performance, getting those metrics, obviously whether it succeeded or failed. And those checks can run from around 14 different global locations. So a lot of people use them to, make sure their site is up, available, and working as they expect it to be from different locations around the globe. So absolutely supported, and invite you to read more about New Relic Synthetics, specifically our ability to have scripted browsers that would work very well for that use case. We'll send you some information on that.
So Matt had a quick follow-up regarding browser and mobile, user monitoring. Does that work equally well for React native apps?
It does. So New Relic Browser supports single-page applications. We have some different code that actually kind of detects when a React page changes, and it's certainly designed to. Oh, I'm sorry. This is React. I went to React browser applications, not React native applications. You'd get some visibility into React native applications. We're still working on that integration. We have some open source code, but yeah, we'll follow up with kind of the code for React Native. For browser, for what it's worth, we also support React browser applications. But Matthew, I'll send you some information about our React Native story. All right. Well, I think that's all the questions we have for right now. Just wanted to thank everyone again for participating in the webinar. There'll be, I believe, a survey Jackson sent out after.
There will be.
And so if any other questions come up, or if you'd like more information, feel free to reach out, and we'll respond to you directly. But yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.